#EndSARS protest in October drew reactions from various groups who had been agitating and engaging the federal government for one form of concession or the other. Critically, former militants in the Niger Delta seized the opportunity to not only throw their weight behind the protest, but also warn, yet again, about the likely consequences of government failing to address issues that are at the heart of their own agitations. Ever since security became the biggest issue in the oil-rich region, a succession of administrations have tried to assuage these perceived feelings of marginalization by committing resources to the Presidential Amnesty Program, which was created by the late President Umaru Yar'Adua. Why have these agitations persisted for so long, despite government's many interventions? Is the program politicized? We'll be talking to retired Colonel M.D. Dikio, Interim Administrator, Presidential Amnesty Program. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Colonel. Thank you for joining us. Well, let's start with your appointment and this new nomenclature of interim administrator instead of coordinator of the Presidential Amnesty Program. Do you have any idea what could have informed this switch in nomenclature?
Thank you, Ruben. Firstly, I want to thank Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces for deeming me fit to be appointed as the interim administrator of the Amnesty Program. I'm not really bothered about titles. What I'm focused on is, one, restoration of the mandate of the Amnesty Program, which is taking services to the Niger Delta where the ex-agitators are domiciled. Two, train the ex-agitators to be net entrepreneurs and employers of labor so that they can get out of being dependent of stipends and become net contributors to the economy of the region. Three, cooperate and coordinate with federal agencies that the federal government of Nigeria created to support the actualization of the amnesty package. Three, work with various state governors to ensure that the Niger Delta becomes the most secure place to live and do business in Nigeria.
Thank you, sir. Now, you recently embarked on what you called Back to the Region tour, and in your various events that you held with separate stakeholders, you said that prior to your appointment, the Presidential Amnesty Program was, in quotes, an Abuja thing. I'd like you to address those two issues and what were your experiences in your Back to the Region tour.
Our Back to the Region tour was informed by the need to take the services to the region where the bulk of the people we service are domiciled. We said back to the region because hitherto several fictions have pervaded, and it was even thought dangerous to hold our meeting in the region. But be that as it may, that at the onset, certain conditions precluded the holding of meetings in the region. I just thought that 11 years after, it was past time to take the program to the region. We were warmly received, and the overwhelming support we received was because of the inclusive nature of our engagement with stakeholders.
Right. There was some dichotomy in the meeting you had last year ago as regards the expiration date of PAP. I mean, I know there are divergent views as regards this, but what's your take on this?
Yes, I saw a misleading caption about an agreement to end the program. On our part in PAP, we want to say emphatically that we are not pulling out a date from the air. Rather, we want to examine in a holistic manner what has been done, how well has it been done, and what needs to be done. And so, based on that, we can benchmark what needs to be done with specific timelines. That will enable us to achieve the objective for which the presidential amnesty program was set up. The concern about the end of the amnesty program is largely informed by the erroneous belief that the amnesty program as we know it, which is a disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program, is the same thing as the amnesty package. The amnesty package was a whole basket of incentives that the federal government promised to the ex-agitators at the time of the amnesty proclamation. We are willing to help make that distinction and initiate a broader conversation on what those concerns are. I think generally there was an agreement in terms that the amnesty program cannot be open-ended. However, the general sentiment expressed is that there were promises that were made that are yet to be fulfilled. We in the amnesty program are determined to ensure that we keep our own part of the bargain by ensuring that our services get to the ex-agitators, who are the primary reasons for which the amnesty program was established.
Well, quickly, Colonel, let me ask you. You talked about promises not fulfilled. What are those promises that have not been fulfilled? And the failure to fulfill those promises, will you say provide a justification for what we have seen now in the Niger Delta in terms of the proliferation of small and light weapons and increasing agitation on the part of Niger Delta youths? Now, will you say that the federal government will need to return to the policy of disarmament? And do you sense that the youth of the Niger Delta will be willing to lay down their arms again?
Well, I recall that during the courtesy call on the governor of Bayelsa State, Governor Dwayne Diri, he raised the issue. I think that as the chief security officer of his state, he's privileged to intel, which we don't have, but we are willing to share in that intel, particularly if it involves ex-agitators. So far, we do not have any indication that ex-agitators are in the business of trafficking in arms. I want to acknowledge that the issue of small arms and light weapons is an endemic issue in Nigeria and in the ECOWAS sub-region generally. I know that for a fact because I had worked on that issue when I was a military advisor to ECOWAS more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, but you said certain promises have not been fulfilled. I asked, what are those promises that have not been fulfilled?
Well, the general sentiment is that a lot of the promises that emanated from the amnesty proclamation are in different stages. Some fulfilled, some are not. I want to recall that the establishment of NDDC was to address the physical development needs of the Niger Delta. Now, a lot of people have their views on how successful that effort has been. We, on our part, are willing to partner with all the relevant agencies of government to see how we all work together to ensure that these aspirations are addressed. What came through clearly is that people are saying that, well, the amnesty program is all we got. So why do you want to scrap the amnesty program when a lot of the promises are yet to be fulfilled? Now, the amnesty program, I must say, is a disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program. Over the years, people have conflated the amnesty program with the amnesty package. The amnesty package is not our remit, but we are willing to help in engaging in that conversation.
Thank you, sir. Now you've been soliciting the support of traditional rulers and governors. What role do you envisage them playing?
Well, we are conscious that the governors and traditional rulers are critical stakeholders in the region. The state governors, for instance, have structures that the presidential amnesty program cannot recreate. We don't want to operate in silos. We want to leverage what they have in a spirit of cooperation so that together we can achieve the primary federal government objective of development and security in the Niger Delta. You can all agree with me that our traditional rulers are the custodians of our traditions, and they have considerable influence. And so we will take whatever support we get wherever we find it. So for us, it contributes to the overall development of the Niger Delta and ensuring a peaceful environment.
Talking about monthly stipends, I'd like to talk about monthly stipends. We know there's been a lot of back and forth as regards the time or the date and the month it is paid, but you are putting a peg on it. You are saying the 25th. But we all know how transactions go, bureaucracy here and there, carrying file from place to place and things like that. So, and we know that once you give a promise and you don't match it up, then people start to agitate all over again. Are you saying that 25th is sacrosanct, that it's nothing on the 25th for the payment of the stipends to these ex-militants on the amnesty program?
Well, for statutory payments, these are payments that come regularly. We have 30,000 ex-agitators. The number is not changing upward. The only thing that can happen is probably if, unfortunately, for one reason or the other, somebody drops out of the scene. Otherwise, these are regular payments, and if we work backwards to accommodate the bureaucratic order of business, we are sure that by 20th, we should have all our ducks lined up, and then, on the 25th, we just pull the trigger, boom, and the payment goes.
Okay, so 25th is sacrosanct, right? They will always see their payment by the 25th.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Well, Colonel, the presidential amnesty program has been very controversial, if we may say so. But could you tell us, what did you meet on the ground? What are the areas of concern that you have observed, and what do you intend to do to address those omissions?
Well, I'm very conversant with how the United Nations runs a DDR program. I think that the Amnesty Office has become a place for tenured appointments. That is far from how to operate a program like this. And so I intend to reorganize the place with the blessing of my superiors to create a lean and efficient machinery so that we will drive each phase of the program with the requisite qualified staff so that we can deliver set targets on time.
No, Colonel, no. I will need specifics. Did you meet, for example, massive corruption on the ground? A lot of complaints, perhaps by contractors, if contractors are involved, and then the agitation by those who are supposed to be beneficiaries of the program. Those will be more specific than a general talk about, I will do this and do that within certain frameworks.
I think my work is cut out for me. When I was appointed and resumed on the 21st of September, an investigation committee had done extensive investigation of what transpired. And I just think that we can learn, rather, let me recast that. I just think that we are not going to be dwelling on the past, but if we learn the lessons of the past, we will do better. There are several complaints which I think are probably, process-driven. And so, for instance, we want to digitalize our operations, create a system in which there will be transparent transaction. I think if we do that very well, it will reduce the incidences of corruption. I also want to address the fact that there are, for instance, some complaints of allowances that are not in the books. Now, we are not committed to paying for things that are not in the books, but if they are clearly in the books, we will ensure that the beneficiaries receive what is due to them.
Speaking of which, what are your plans to address the issue of outstanding fees and entitlements to students of the PAP, as well as disquiet amongst those who have yet to be sent for training?
Firstly, let's talk about the disquiet about outstanding payments to students. I did mention that there was an investigation committee that did extensive work to authenticate those who are bona fide students of the Amnesty program. As I speak to you, all the students that are abroad have been paid. Most of the students in Nigeria have been paid, but there was an issue with about 1,880 students who did not lend themselves to the verification process. Now, that was what I met. Now, when I took over and I looked at the problem and I asked what the issues were, they told me that they were not able to verify because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then as that was being put to bed, the issue of the NSAS protests came up. And so I just felt that, just standing on one spot, on excuses was not going to cut it. And therefore, I proposed that all those students who were yet to be verified could do what is needed about addressing their identity. And so I passed on a message that they could go to the courts, swear to an affidavit to say that they are who they say they are, and that they are bona fide students of the university they claim to be, take the affidavit to the heads of department and or their deans to authenticate. All those returns have been sent in, I'm told. I've been on tour for 13 days running now, and so when I go back, I'll look at the list, approve payment, and we'll be done with that. We also, however, want that we will, at the appropriate time, when the opportunity is ripe, to authenticate if those submissions are true. And if there are false entries, the students will be prosecuted and the universities will be sanctioned.
Let's talk about training centers. And, what are the training centers? How many training centers do you have? And by extension, you must also tell us the things you're training them on.
Well, the training centers were purpose-designed. However, unfortunately, not all of them have been completed. The one in Kayama that fortunately was completed had an incident of looting and stripping of the center. During my trip to the Niger Delta, I went there specifically to see things for myself. On resumption of duty, one of the first things I did was to send a team to the Kayama training facility, including a quantity surveyor who came out with a very extensive report of what was actually built, what damages they found, and what it would take to restore the place. The training center in Bomadi is at a very, very advanced level of completion. so too the training center in Agadagba in Ondo State. The other two centers are at their foundation level. I intend to send the same team of experts to go to these centers to assess their level of completion. However, we're not going to sit on our backside waiting for those places to be completed. And so during my visit, I visited the Shanghai farm that has a training facility and the Leadership Training Center in Alu near Port Harcourt. What we want to do is to rejig the training to reflect our new approach to empowerment, which is to train these ex-agitators as entrepreneurs and net contributors to the economy of the region. I also found that some of the trainings were not based on a clearly articulated need analysis. And so we want to refocus our training to address the needs of the Niger Delta. For instance, as a largely riverine community, we think a focus on riverine transportation where we have comparative advantage is key. And so we have a whole lot, we're looking at.
Well, Colonel, the Amnesty program is owing contractors about 712 billion naira. Yes or no? And how did that come about? And is there any plan while you are in the saddle as interim administrator to pay those contractors? And beyond that, do you think the Amnesty program is something that should be there forever? I mean, it was a product of the agitation by Niger Delta youths who became militants. And since then, we've seen a lot on the part of the federal government trying to ensure peace and security in that region. Should there be a cutoff point? And should that be respected? Because it looks like this is now going to go on almost endlessly.
There's a general consensus that the Amnesty program cannot be open-ended. However, what came out clearly is how to get there. The critical stakeholders in the region want to be sure that the Amnesty program is not ended prematurely. We in the Presidential Amnesty program are very, very focused on addressing what has been done properly, what needs to be done, and then design a plan to ensure that the objectives of the program are met. As to the question of debt, the investigation committee established that contractors were owed about 71.4 billion naira. That is way above our yearly budget of 65 billion naira. I don't want to second guess how they got there. On our part, what we are committed to doing is to ensure prudent allocation of funds to a needs-driven line of expenditure. I want to also say that apart from the verification done by the investigation committee, we had almost completed a reconciliation of those figures before I went on tour. And so when I get back, we are going to start payment after a review of our records. We want to assure our contractors that their payments will be based solely on their terms of contract.
Sir, with regards to the winding down of the program, what happens to the beneficiaries who have come to rely on their 65,000 naira a month stipend? Surely the rug will not just be yanked out from under them. What are the plans to have them less reliant and more willing to part ways with the program?
We are confident that if we do a good packaging of their training and exiting them into being independent entrepreneurs, they will be in a position that they will earn more than 65,000 naira and rather become, net employers of labor. It's a tough task, but we are confident that with the cooperation of all the critical stakeholders, agencies of the federal government, state governments, and the like, that we will achieve that objective. As a matter of fact, the Minister of State for Petroleum has thrown an olive branch to us, and we have made a submission. We want to partner with the Ministry of Petroleum to transit some of our trainees into the pipeline protection program. You will agree with me that that will enable them earn more money than 65,000 naira. We don't want to leave people dependent on stipends. That is the bottom line.
Thank you very much, Colonel Dikio, retired, for joining us on the morning show and for your insights and information. Thank you very much indeed.